Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is good. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. This is the Grizzlies end of season stats spectacular show. I'm going to close down the 2022-2023 Memphis Grizzlies season with a reflection of some of the notable individual and team stats. I put a lot of work into this episode, combing through my Twitter, looking for unique facts and figures. I look at some of the information that Grizzlies PR sends out. I try to compile a lot of my favorite notes and facts about the Grizzlies season. Puts a nice little bow on the year. It was a very successful season for the Memphis Grizzlies once again, although most of that success came in the regular season. They made the playoffs for the 13th time in franchise history, but they still have never won a playoff series in consecutive seasons. However, this season was the first time in franchise history they've had home court advantage in the first round in consecutive seasons. They won 51 games. That is the fourth most wins in a season in franchise history. They finished as the second seed in the Western Conference for the second straight year. That is their highest finish ever. They established several team records. Many individual records were set, but when you come off a 56-win season where you make the second round, coming up short of that with 51 wins and a first-round loss is going to feel slightly disappointing. Also, when we talk about this past season, the story of the season is going to include the off-the-court issues and suspension of Ja Morant. There's no way to tell the story of the 2022-2023 Memphis Grizzlies without mentioning Ja Morant taking time away from the team and ultimately being suspended for conduct detrimental to the league. This Grizzly season and all the good that occurred, to some degree, will be reduced in sports history to Ja got suspended. Ja missed out on all NBA because of his suspension. He's now facing another suspension as the Grizzlies head into the 2023-2024 year. But now that I've acknowledged that, we can get to the stats and the highlights of the 2022-2023 season. Like I said, the Grizzlies finishes the second seed for the second consecutive season, which ties their best conference finish ever. They won the Southwest Division for the second straight season. Those are the only two division titles in franchise history. They set a new franchise mark with 13 wins against their division this season. They set a new franchise record with 35 home wins. This was the first time in franchise history they led the NBA in home wins. They set a franchise record for best home winning percentage. Their 35-6 record at home was the best home record for any team in the NBA since the start of the 2017-2018 season. A little bit of trivia, they finished the season undefeated, 13-0 on Friday and Saturday night home games. It's the best ticket in town. They tied for the most 20-point wins in the league. They had the biggest comeback in the NBA this season, which was the biggest comeback in franchise history when they rallied from 29 points down against the San Antonio Spurs. They set new franchise marks for the best offensive rating in a season. They had a 115.1 offensive rating, which beat out last season's 114.6 offensive rating. They averaged 116.9 points per game. That's the highest in franchise history. They made 12 three-pointers per game. That's the highest in franchise history. This is the fourth consecutive season they've set new franchise records for points per game and three-pointers per game. They led the NBA in points in the paint once again, and they actually posted the most points in the paint ever recorded. That stat has been kept since the 1996-1997 season. They also set franchise marks for the most fast break points. They led the NBA in field goal percentage defense for the first time in their franchise history. One bad note, they were last in the NBA in free throw percentage. That's the first time in franchise history they've ever been last in free throw percentage. This regular season, they tied a franchise record for the longest winning streak. They won 11 straight games. They also won 11 straight games last season. The Suns and the Grizzlies are the only two franchises to have multiple 10-game winning streaks over the last two seasons. One thing about this year's 11-game win streak, in each one of the wins, they scored 115 or more points, which is a feat so rare that no team had done that in 40 seasons. 1983 was the last time a team won 11 straight games, scoring 115 or more in each game. In the midst of that 11-game win streak, they scored 120 or more in 7 straight games. That's the longest streak of scoring 120 or more in franchise history. This season, they also scored as a team 130 or more points 15 times, which broke the team record of 11 games set last season. So the offense kept going up and up this year. League-wide, those trends have continued, and the Grizzlies certainly a part of that. Now looking at individual stats, the increased scoring league-wide and for the Grizzlies was reflected in the points per game totals of Ja Morant and Desmond Bane this season. Ja Morant set a new franchise record by averaging 26.2 points per game. He actually averaged more than that last season. In 2021-2022, he averaged 27.4 points per game, but he didn't play enough games to qualify for the official leaderboard. So this year, he does play enough games, sets a new franchise mark for points per game in a season. Meanwhile, Desmond Bane set a career high with 21.5 points per game. Those are the two highest points per game seasons in the Memphis era. Only Sharif Abdur-Rahim averaged more points per game in a season than Desmond Bane did this year. Ja Morant made the All-Star game. He started the All-Star game for the second consecutive season, although he was an injury replacement as a starter. Not only is he the first player in franchise history to start the All-Star game twice, he's the first player in franchise history to even make the All-Star game in consecutive seasons. So Ja Morant continues getting honored with those individual acknowledgments by making the All-Star game. Ja was 10th in the NBA in points per game this year. He was 5th in the league in assists per game. As far as total points and total assists, he set new marks there. The assists per game, 8.1, that was a career high. That is tied for the 4th best season in franchise history, second in the Memphis era, only trailing Jason Williams, who averaged 8.3 assists per game in the 2002-2003 season. Ja Morant, he posted 7 triple-doubles. That's by far the most in any season in franchise history. The previous season high for triple-doubles in a season for the Grizzlies was Delon Wright's 3 triple-doubles from the tanking end of the 2019 season. Ja now has 11 regular season triple-doubles in his career, by far the most in franchise history. Marc Gasol is second in franchise history for triple-doubles with 5. Marc Gasol, Delon Wright, and Pau Gasol are the only players besides Ja to have more than one triple-double in Grizzlies franchise history. Ja Morant also continued his league-wide and worldwide popularity. According to the NBA, he was the 4th most viewed player on social media. I don't know if that stat matters to you. It just demonstrates how Ja Morant is by far the most popular Grizzlies player ever. Ja also set a franchise record and a personal best by scoring 28 points in a quarter. He had 28 points in the third quarter against the Lakers in February. That was the highest scoring quarter in the NBA this season. Ja Morant set a single-game career high with 17 assists in a game against the Raptors in December. Ja posted the highest usage percentage in franchise history, beating out his mark from 2 seasons ago. He moved into 4th place in franchise history in total assists. He passed Mike Bibby. He trails Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, and Jason Williams. He's 4th in franchise history now in playoff points in just his few seasons in the NBA. League-wide, Ja was 12th in free throw attempts and 13th in free throws made. A negative stat for Ja Morant this past season, he shot 30.7% on three-pointers. Of the 149 players to qualify for the NBA's three-point percentage leaderboard, Ja was 148th. Only Paolo Banchero had a worse three-point percentage than him of those players that qualified. Ja was joined at the All-Star game this year by his teammate Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren made his first career All-Star appearance, and this was the first time in franchise history that the Grizzlies had 2 All-Stars in the same season. Also, Jaren Jackson Jr. quite notably won Defensive Player of the Year, joining Marc Gasol as the only 2 players in franchise history to receive that honor. He made all defensive first team for the 2nd straight season. Tony Allen is the only other player in franchise history with consecutive first team all defensive appearances. Jaren is the first player in NBA history to have a Defensive Player of the Year award and 2 all defensive first team appearances by his age 23 season. Jaren led the NBA in blocks per game for the 2nd straight season. He set a personal best for total blocks in a season, which also was the Grizzlies' new franchise record for blocks in a season. He set franchise records this year in blocks per game, and block percentage. He posted the 7th highest block percentage ever recorded. The only players to have a higher block percentage in a season are Manute Bol, who did it 4 times, and Serge Ibaka and Hassan Whiteside. Jaren Jackson Jr. is now 4th in Grizzlies franchise history in blocks. Next season, he will pass Stroma Swift to move into 3rd. He will only trail Marc and Pau Gasol. He set a career best and tied the franchise mark for most blocks in a game with 8. Jaren averaged a career high 18.6 points per game, career high 6.8 rebounds per game to go along with that career high 3.0 blocks per game. Jaren increased his field goal percentage massively this year. He made over 50% of his field goal attempts for the first time since his rookie year. He made a career high 58.5% of his two-point attempts. Jaren's 58.5% two-point accuracy was the 4th highest percentage on two-pointers in franchise history, behind Brandon Clarke's rookie season and 2 seasons of Jonas Valanciunas. Jaren became the first player in NBA history to average 18 points per game, 3 blocks per game, and 1 three-pointer made per game. He became the first player in NBA history to have consecutive games posting at least 35 points, 3 blocks, and 3 made three-pointers. Jaren averaged over 20 points, 3 blocks, and 1 steal per 36 minutes for the second straight year. The only players in NBA history to hit those marks in consecutive seasons: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, and now Jaren Jackson Jr. Not only did Jaren set a career high with 8 blocks in a game, he also had a career high 5 steals in a game this season. He did that against the Jazz in February. In the playoffs, he set a career high for himself with grabbing 14 rebounds. This last season, the 2022-2023 season, Jaren had 4 games where he picked up at least 5 blocks and 3 steals. The rest of the NBA combined only had 2 such games. If you want to lower it to 2 steals, Jaren had 8 games with at least 5 blocks and 2 steals. If you add up every other player in the NBA, they only had 7 of those games. The only player besides Jaren to have more than 1 game with 5 blocks and 2 steals was Anthony Davis, and he had 2. Jaren had 8. That's the most games in a season that any players had with 5 blocks and 2 steals since the 2007-2008 NBA season, where Josh Smith had 11 of those games. Jaren had 28 games this year with at least 2 blocks, 1 steal, and 1 made 3. That's the second most such games any player has had in a single season, only trailing Jaren Jackson Jr. from last year. Now, there is a couple of negative stats for Jaren, maybe one. This might be too cherry-picked, but Jaren finished the playoffs this year struggling in road games. Over the past 2 seasons, in his last 6 road playoff games, Jaren has attempted at least 12 field goal attempts and has shot 33% or worse in each one of those games. That is tied with Bob Cousy for the longest streak in NBA history of road playoff games, shooting 33% or worse while attempting at least 12 field goal attempts. Cousy's streak happened 63 years ago. But overall, an incredible season for Jaren Jackson Jr., who made a giant leap into becoming an all-star and defensive player of the year. Another player who made a huge leap this season was Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane, I already told you he posted the second highest points per game season since the Grizzlies moved to Memphis as far as the official leaderboards are concerned. He hit that career high 21.5 points per game, also career highs in rebounds and assists, averaged 5 rebounds per game, 4.4 assists per game. He shot a career low 40.8% on his three-pointers, but a lot of that possibly was because of the toe injury he had. He missed a bunch of games this season with a toe injury. When he returned from the toe injury, he only shot 39% from 3 in the 46 games to close the season. Before the toe injury, he was shooting 45% from 3. So perhaps that did have something to do with it, although maybe his averages would have come down anyway. Despite playing in only 58 games this year, Desmond made the 4th most three-pointers in franchise history. He holds the Grizzlies' single-season record for most threes made in a season, which was set, of course, last year. Desmond made 88.3% of his free throws. That was good enough for 15th in the NBA, and that was the second best free throw percentage season in franchise history, behind the 90.3% he shot last season. He has the highest career free throw percentage in franchise history at 88.3%. Courtney Lee is second, Brian Cardinal is third, James Posey is fourth, and Mario Chalmers is fifth. For his career, Desmond Bane is averaging 16.1 points per game and is making 42.5% of his three-pointers and shooting 88% for the line. He is one of 5 players all time with career averages of at least 15 points per game while shooting 40% from 3 and 88% for the line. The other 4 are Steph Curry, Ray Allen, Peja Stojakovic, and Mark Price. He and Tyrese Halliburton, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Ben Gordon are the only players to hit 40% or higher on at least 4
3-point attempts per game
in each of their first 3 seasons in the NBA. Desmond Bane scored a career-high 38 points this year in a game against the Nets in October. Also made a career-high 8 threes in that game. He got his first career double-double this year, where he posted a career-high 11 rebounds against the Hornets in January. He had a playoff career-high 36 in the overtime loss against the Lakers in Game 4. He joined Ja and Zach Randolph as the only players in franchise history to score 30 or more in consecutive playoff games. Desmond had 8 30-point games in the regular season. That is tied for the 9th most 30-point games in a season in franchise history. Desmond this year also had a streak which tied over to last year. So from the 2021-2022 season, the streak began and it ended this year, but he ended up making a 3-pointer in a franchise record 49 straight games. Also in the midst of that 49-game streak, there were 30 straight games where he made at least 2 3-pointers, which is probably an even more impressive record. Next up, let's do some stats about Dillon Brooks, and we will do that right after this short break. Grizzlies fans, 2023-2024 season tickets are on sale right now. Season tickets are the best way to guarantee your seats to the biggest matchups at the lowest prices all season long. For more information on Grizzlies season tickets, visit grizzlies.com/season tickets or call 901-888-HOOP. All right, Dillon Brooks finished his season on a negative note as the Grizzlies lost in the first round. Dillon struggled from the field. He made headlines for poking the bear, calling out LeBron James, then compounded the issue with his performance on the court. There are reports that the Grizzlies and Dillon Brooks are going to part ways, and if that's the case, Dillon would have finished his Grizzlies playoff career with 9 consecutive games where he attempted at least 11 field goal attempts and shot under 40% in every single one of those games. That is the longest such streak in the playoffs since the ABA-NBA merger. Now, if Dillon moves on from the Grizzlies, and all reports indicate he will finish top 10 in franchise history in points and steals, field goals made and attempted, 3-pointers made, wins. He's top 10 in playoff points, playoff assists, playoff steals, playoff 3-pointers, and of course, he's top 10 in fouls. Now, this season was notable for Dillon in that he was recognized for his defensive work. He made all defensive second team. He joined Jaren Jackson Jr., Marc Gasol, Tony Allen, and Mike Conley as the only Grizzlies players to ever make an all-defensive team. According to Grizzlies PR, Dillon ranked first in effective field goal percentage defense when guarding other 2023 NBA All-Stars. Now, the problems with Dillon this year came with his inefficiency on the offensive end. He shot a career-low 39.6%. He played a career-high 30.3 minutes per game, but only averaged 14.3 points per game, which is the fewest points he's averaged in any season since his injury-plagued second season. Now, a big part of his scoring decrease is his usage went down massively. He went from a 28.3 usage in 2021-2022 to a 21.4% usage in 2022-2023. That was one of the biggest drops among all NBA players, according to John Schumann. Now, in many media availabilities, Dillon basically talked about how he was not comfortable with his role. He was asked to do less and less. He averaged Dillon did just 13.6 field goal attempts per game. This was a decrease from the previous season, where Dillon attempted 16.4 field goal attempts per game. But of the 86 players last year to shoot at least 12 times per game, Dillon was last in points per game. Dillon led the NBA in technical fouls. He was 8th league-wide in total personal fouls. That's a category he's led in 2 other seasons. A lot of that was Dillon was available for 73 games. This season, that's by far the most games played by any of the Grizzlies starters this season. Only Santi Aldama and Tyus Jones played more games for the Grizzlies this year. Dillon attempted the 3rd most three-pointers in a season in franchise history this past year, only trailing Desmond Bane's 2021-2022 season and Mike Miller in the 2006-2007 season. Dillon Brooks made a three-pointer in his final 29 games on the Grizzlies. That is a career-long streak for Dillon by a lot. That is tied for the 3rd longest streak of games hitting at least one three-pointer in franchise history. The only longer streaks, Desmond Bane's previously mentioned 49-game streak, which is a multi-season streak, and Tyreke Evans had a 31-game streak the year he played for the Grizzlies. Overall, Dillon right now is 12th in games played in franchise history, 9th in total points, 3rd in made three-pointers, 10th in steals, 15th in assists, and in those playoff numbers, 8th in playoff points, 3rd in playoff three-pointers made, 8th in playoff assists, 10th in playoff steals, and if you add up regular season and postseason wins, he is 10th in franchise history in total wins. Here's a random stat. Dillon set his career high for minutes played in a game this season. Dillon had never played 40 minutes in a game until this year. He played 40 minutes in a regular season game and then played 41 minutes in the overtime Game 4 loss against the Lakers in the playoffs. Dillon set a career high with 30 attempted field goals in a loss to the Nets in November. The context you need for that one: Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane were all unavailable for that game. Also, a final Dillon stat: he posted 4 or more assists in a career best 5 straight games back in November. Kudos to him. The 5th starter, Steven Adams, he only played 42 games this season because of the knee injury that ended up taking much longer to heal than anyone anticipated. The Grizzlies this year were 28-14 when Steven Adams played. Steven Adams averaged a career-high 11.5 rebounds per game. He raised his scoring average from 6.9 points per game in the previous season to 8.6 points per game. This year, Steven Adams became the first player in Grizzlies franchise history to have consecutive 20-rebound games. He did that in back-to-back games on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. He tied a franchise record and set a career high with 13 offensive rebounds in the game against the Kings on New Year's Day, and he tied his career high with 23 total rebounds in that game. He also set a franchise record with 16 first-half rebounds. He did that against the Hornets. Now, Steven Adams shot a career-low 36.4% from the foul line, which is a truly abysmal number. Quite impressive in its badness. That is the worst free throw season in Grizzlies history. The only players ever in NBA history to attempt at least 3 free throw attempts a game and shoot under 40%. Wilt Chamberlain did it once. Ben Wallace did it once. DeAndre Jordan did it twice. Andre Drummond did it 3 times. And Steven Adams did it last year. Now, Tyus Jones set a lot of career marks in 2022, 2023. There was some thought that he would not play as many minutes because he got to start a lot of games in the previous season, but he played a career high 24.3 minutes per game, set a career high with 10.3 points per game. That's the first time he's ever scored in double figures or averaged in double figures for the season, up from last season's career high 8.7 points per game. He set a career high in assists per game with 5.2 assists per game. He led the NBA in assist to turnover ratio for the 5th straight season. He's the first player to ever lead the NBA in assist to turnover ratio for 5 straight seasons. Tyus set a career high with 28 points in a game. He had 6 games this season with 20 points and 10 assists. Coming into the season, he had 0 20 and 10 games. Tyus's 6 20 and 10 games this season is tied for the 6th highest single season total in franchise history. Ja Morant actually set a franchise record with 13 games this season with at least 20 points and 10 assists. The only other players with more games of 20 points and 10 assists in a season than Tyus had this year, Mike Conley and Mike Bibby. So Ja, Mike Conley, and Mike Bibby, the only players with more 20.10 assist games in a season. Tyus Jones started 22 games this year. He was 13-9 as a starter. In those starts, he averaged 16.4 points per game, 8.1 assists per game, and 4 rebounds per game. He made 41.5% of his three-point attempts as a starter. Tyus also recorded his first career triple-double this past season. He did that playing against his brother in that Spurs game where the Grizzlies rallied from 29 points down. Moving on to Luke Kennard, whom the Grizzlies traded for at the trade deadline this year. Luke Kennard led the NBA in three-point percentage for the 2nd straight year. Luke Kennard shot a career-high 49.4% on three-pointers.
That is the 9th highest three-point percentage ever recorded, and the 5th highest if you don't count the years the three-point line was shortened.
He played 24 regular season games on the Grizzlies, and he made 54% of his three-pointers on the Grizzlies. That is the highest three-point percentage for any player in Grizzlies franchise history over any 24-game span. Because of that absurd three-point percentage, he has the highest three-point percentage, of course, in Grizzlies franchise history, but he has it by 12.5 percentage points. Desmond Bane is second in franchise history in career three-point percentage at 42.5%. Luke Kennard set a franchise record with 10 three-pointers in a game. He made 10 out of 11 three-pointers in a game against the Rockets. That is tied for the highest three-point percentage in a game for any player who's made at least 10 three-pointers. Luke Kennard's three-point accuracy also carried over into the playoffs. Of all players in NBA playoff history to attempt at least 80 three-pointers, Luke Kennard has the 3rd highest three-point percentage at 46.3%. By the way, Desmond Bane is 11th if you use those same parameters at 43.3%. Moving down the roster, next up we will do Xavier Tillman. Xavier Tillman ended up playing a huge role for the 2022-2023 Grizzlies, and this is despite starting the season on the fringes of the rotation. Even with Jaren Jackson Jr. unavailable and injured at the beginning of the year, Xavier frequently picked up DNPs, but once Steven Adams went down, Tillman's role greatly increased. He ended up starting a career-high 29 games. He averaged career highs in points, rebounds, assists, and steals per game. As a starter, X averaged 9.7 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game, and 1.3 steals per game. He raised his overall field goal percentage a whopping 16 percentage points. He set a career high by making 61.5% of his field goal attempts. Now, a good bit of that was he totally stopped attempting three-pointers, which in my opinion he needs to bring back. But he took a large dip in his two-point accuracy from his rookie year to his sophomore year, but he bounced all the way up this season to making a career-best 63.2% of his two-pointers. He scored a regular season career-high 20 points against the Magic in March, but most impressively in the Game 2 victory over the Lakers, Xavier had a career-high 22 points and posted his first career 20.10 rebound game. Now, Tillman had a bunch of encouraging moments from this last season. Konchar, also a veteran of the squad, had a pretty disappointing year. He did score a career-high 19 points. He did that in a game against the Thunder in November. Also on the final game of the regular season, the ridiculous game with the Grizzlies backups against the Thunder, Konchar had a career-high 5 steals. Coming into this season, Giddey's career high for steals in a game was 3. He had 2 games of 4 steals this season and then the career high 5 in the final game. He did lead the team in drawn charges, but overall, I think it was a letdown because more was going to be expected from Konchar this year. With the departure of Melton and Kyle Anderson, it seemed like an opportunity, and they signed Konchar to an extension last summer. So you thought this is a time for a greater role for Konchar, and he ended up playing a lot more early in the year, but he eventually kind of lost his shooting touch. His minuscule scoring ability diminished even further. He went 35 straight games at one point without scoring in double digits. His career three-point percentage plummeted. Coming into the season, Konchar had made 40.6% of his career three-point attempts. In October and November, he made 41% of his three-pointers, but from December 1st to the end of the season, Konchar only hit 27.7% of his threes. That's over the final 52 games of the season. He shot 33.9% overall from the three-point line. He did have a playoff highlight. We all remember the big highlight block he had on Anthony Davis in the playoffs, but he did miss all 4 of his three-point attempts in that series and is now just 1 for 11 in his postseason career on three-pointers. Konchar also shot a career low on his two-pointers. So a disappointing season from John Konchar. Despite those decreased stats and production, his lineup data was still mostly good, reinforcing the impression that he just helps you whenever he's out there as a connective piece. He was 5th on the Grizzlies this year in on-off net rating swing behind Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Steven Adams, and John Morant. Brandon Clarke tore his Achilles this season, so a catastrophic ending to his 4th season. He played 56 games before the injury. He was shooting a career best 65.6% from the field. He was on pace to smash his franchise record 61.8% mark from his rookie season. Last season, remember, he was shooting 64.4%, or he did shoot 64.4% on his field goal attempts, but didn't play enough games to qualify for the all-time leader board. Because of this season-ending injury for Brandon, he has played 64 games or fewer in each of his 4 seasons in the league, and of course, he will not play anywhere near 64 games next season, as he will be rehabbing that Achilles injury. Back in December, Brandon had a career-best 10-game streak of scoring in double figures. He also had his first 2 career 20.10 rebound games, including a game against the Suns where he had 24 points, 10 rebounds, and was a career-best 10 out of 10 from the line. He also had 9 more games this season where he attempted at least 6 field goal attempts and made 80% or better of those attempts. He has 28 of those games in his career in the regular season and has passed Marc Gasol for the most of those games in franchise history. Marc had 20 games in his regular season career where he attempted at least 6 field goal attempts and made 80% or more of those shots. Also this season, Brandon Clarke posted the highest field goal percentage over any 6-game span for any player in franchise history. He made 36 out of 47 field goal attempts during a Grizzlies 6-game winning streak. Now, Santi Aldama had a big breakout season. He made a huge sophomore leap. He went from an end-of-the-bench guy who played almost no meaningful minutes in 2021-2022 to being 2nd on the team in games played and 6th in minutes played. Santi even started 20 games. Last year, in 2021-2022, he basically couldn't hit a three-pointer. All of his three-point makes his rookie season came in garbage time. This past season, in 2022-2023, Santi hit 35.3% of his three-point attempts. He made 94 three-pointers. He averaged 9 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists per game, and 0.6 steals and 0.6 blocks per game. He is the 11th player in franchise history to record at least 600 points and 300 rebounds by his age 22 season. The others to do so, Bryant Reeves, Shareef Abdur-Rahim, Mike Bibby, Pau Gasol, Rudy Gay, O.J. Mayo, Darrell Arthur, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Ja Morant. As you hear those names, perhaps you noticed, all of those were very high draft picks. The only one not taken in the top 8 was Darrell Arthur. This past season, Santi had 4 double-doubles. He posted 2 20-point, 10-rebound games. He had a career-high 22 and grabbed a career-high 14 rebounds against the Mavericks in a game in March. Also set a new career high with 5 assists in a game and made 4 threes in a game. Another single-game career high. He became just the 9th player in Grizzlies franchise history to pick up at least 40 blocks, 40 steals, and 90 made threes in a single season, joining Jaren Jackson Jr., Marc Gasol, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gay, Matt Barnes, James Posey, Shane Battier, and Michael Dickerson. Santi Aldama, of course, if you remember, he was the 30th pick in the 2021 draft, the final pick that came over as part of the Mike Conley trade. Now, as much as Santi had a breakout season, Ziaire Williams had possibly the worst second year you could imagine. The offseason dreams of him replacing the lost production of Melton and Kyle Anderson, of him growing into that wing with size the team desperately needs. Any thoughts he could battle for Dillon Brooks' starting lineup spot? No. Ziaire dealt with some nagging injuries. He missed 34 games due to injury, but there were also 10 other games where he either got a DNP or was inactive due to being in the G League. He fell behind David Roddy and John Konchar in the rotation. So he will be looking for a year 3 bounce back. He did, though, post career highs with 24 points and 9 assists. Of course, that was in the final regular season game where he played a ton of minutes as all the Grizzlies backups played against the Thunder. Now, speaking of that Thunder game, let's talk about Kenneth Lofton Jr., a.k.a. Junior Lofton. Junior Lofton began the year on a 2-way contract, but eventually was given a fully guaranteed deal as the team waived Kennedy Chandler. In the final game against the Thunder, Junior scored 42 points and pulled down 14 rebounds. That is the most points for any player ever in their first career start. In the 60 years that we have this data for who starts a game, he's the first player ever to have 40 points and 10 rebounds in their first career start. Junior scored a franchise record 35 points in the second half. That's the franchise record for most points in any half. It's the third most points in a half for any rookie ever. That data only goes back 25 years, where we have the full play-by-play data as far as quarters and halves and the way it breaks down. He is the 4th player in franchise history to have a 40-point, 10-rebound game. Ja Morant, Pau Gasol, and Shareef Abdur-Rahim have the other 3. So, Junior Lofton came out big in his first career start. Now, the other rookies we will cover, David Roddy and Jake LaRavia. David Roddy ended up as a regular in the Grizzlies rotation as the season finished. He ended up playing the 24th most minutes among all rookies in franchise history. He hit the 7th most threes of any rookie in franchise history. He appeared in 70 games. He got 4 starts. His most memorable moment was his career-high 24 points in a big victory over the Mavericks. Jake LaRavia, who was drafted with the 19th pick, he ended up appearing in 35 games. He scored in double figures 3 times with a high of 13 points. And finally, not to be forgotten, we will acknowledge Vince Williams Jr., who, as just a novelty stat, in the game against the Thunder, played all 48 minutes, ended up with career highs of 15 points and 8 rebounds in that one, and also attempted 14 three-pointers. Unfortunately, he missed 13 of them, which is by far the most three-point misses for any player in any game in Grizzlies franchise history. And I guess it would not be complete without mentioning the head coach, Taylor Jenkins. We can close on Taylor Jenkins, who this past season moved into second in Grizzlies franchise history in coaching victories. He passed Dave Yeager with 35 wins. Next season, he would pass Lionel Hollins as the all-time winningest coach in Grizzlies franchise history. Taylor Jenkins also picked up his third career Coach of the Month award. He was named Western Conference Coach of the Month for March and April. And there you have it, the Grizzlies season in review, stats spectacular. I appreciate everybody who's listened to Grits and Grinds all season long. And if this is your first time, welcome. Make sure you stay subscribed in every podcast app and subscribe on YouTube for enhanced video versions of these podcasts. Anyways, hope you guys are having a great off season. I will talk to you soon. Go Grizz.